Hello. For those of you who don't know, I'm not even going to do that today because I'm going to do something a little esoteric. I'm going to pose a question. Who am I? Um, that's a question I've dealt with for a while. Obviously, that question started me wearing black a whole lot. Um, Unlike all the emo guys that started doing it in middle school and high school and all the emo kids, they were all depressed. I'm more of a I don't know. So I'm going to, I'll put it this way. For a very long time, I've come to terms with death. I've come to terms with handling death and um, understanding it and understanding that one day I will die. So I do tend to wear more black. Um, and why am I saying all this? Who am I? I'll Actually, it's a little bit easier to put it like this. I think Jesus was supposed to be a teacher. While he is God, God came to teach us, to save us. I don't think that the organized church was supposed to precipitate out of that. I kind of said this in my last video, so I'll say it again. I am pretty now skeptical of hyper organized religion. You can now. Here's the thing. I do believe that in the pursuit of truth, a lot of people will come to similar understandings. That's one. Um, and two, actually, and I also believe that because of that, that you're allowed to agree with certain ideas that you didn't generate, even if they came from totalitarian regimes. Um, it's like, for example, Karl Marx. He saw a materialistic representation of something that was going on, and he said, "Let's just say capital." Um, and the funny thing is, like, I think that humans have the right to ownership. But I also think that he was pointing at something and he got the wrong conclusions. Because money for the last, since I think it was 1913 on Jekyll Island, but long before that, yeah, 1913, money was tied to something tangible. So there was a magic trick that happened on Jekyll Island. We said beforehand, we said we could exchange gold, physical, tangible gold, bricks, for currency, paper. That was I've heard it said multiple times, and I agree with it. That was an alchemical trick to say to turn gold into paper, and then the institution that prints the paper gets to literally print gold bars, right? So actually, when you inject the paper as a form of debt, there's now extra gold flowing around, and at some point it's going to collapse. Unless you just actually print more money, which is what has been happening. Um, which is why gold is now like, what is it? Like $4,000 an ounce. Just put that in perspective. It was what, like 20 an ounce way back when I started. I know 32 was one of the numbers, was one of the important numbers back then. Like, I think that was when, I don't care. Like, I should care. I think it was Nixon who someone decided to pull us off the gold standard. Like at some point, it had to be reevaluated, and people got pissed when they realized that we were printing money. Because hint, hint, the U.S. government was evil by that time, and the banks were evil at that time. And then because of this, the moment we go off the gold standard is the moment that paper becomes power. It's no longer like 3 layers separated power. It's now power in and of itself. It has its own properties. And what I mean by that is beforehand, the reason why gold was sort of like a currency was because back in medieval days, kings would hoard their gold, and then they would give out pieces of gold as a symbol of their power to their lords to distinguish them as having a smaller version of power from their king as a symbol, so that way that lord could say that I own this land because my king gave it to me, and I have the authority of him to do what I need to do with it. And that means you guys are going to have to work for me and lease the land back from me if you want to live on it. So gold was a symbol of power. So that's one step. And then once you make gold equal money, that's another step. That's 2 layers of power. So that's the money became a replacement for the metaphor of power. And then once you separate the money from the gold, like money became a hyperreality for power, and now it became a separate entity once you break that separation. Where was I going with this? Anyways, I forget where I started to get there. I think the world is more spiritual than we've been told. I think the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church have created a system where their people are put into a receptive, submissive state. And because it's the really hard question of who am I requires a whole lot of self-perception. It requires and you actually have to perceive yourself as an individual, which thankfully, like, that precipitated out of the Catholic Church, which is how Protestantism came around. But how do I put this? There are attributes that are clearly manifested in us that show that we are children of God. And I'm going to use the name I am that I am because there's a very distinct way to describe this. He tends to manifest himself as fire, which is kind of a radical idea, because what is fire? Actually, fire is a pattern of light that I'll hold some up. Let's see if it's visible. I have a candle burning. It's not super clear right now, but when I look at the fire, for whatever reason, fire has all sorts of waves and stuff, even when there's no air movement. It just waves on its own. And I think that's because light interacts with it, like the ambient light, because light moves in wave forms too. So fire is actually going to dance, even if there's no this is theoretical. I don't know. I haven't done the study, but fire dances. But fire isn't actually there. It is a light pattern being dispersed from a combustion. From combustion. And I think that's sort of like what our soul is, in a weird way. I think our soul is like a pattern of psychic energy that was able to manifest in our brain. So like our bodies are like candles, sort of. Yeah, I would think our bodies are like candles. They're energy candles though, which is weird to say. Or maybe I should say informational candles. Yeah, psychic candles, informational candles. Um, so like the actual way to describe consciousness is the way Alan Watts kind of described it. Your brain, if you just analyze it at a materialistic level, is just giving off a, a whole bunch of thoughts, like 40,000 thoughts a day, and like there's like if you just look at it materialistically, you may eventually like see a pattern. Like some people will. Like AI will probably be able to help us with this. Like if one thing AI can do well, it's pattern recognition, or at least you can run highly highly specialized computers. It doesn't have to be AI that are good at pattern recognition. You are actually the organizing spirit that is generated from the continuity of your embodiment that is generating the thought patterns, the little electrical signals. It's actually a pattern of patterns. So what I mean by this is all those micro electrical signals. There's a pattern. The patterns of those tend to be thoughts. So like how you move your hands, those are thoughts. But in a way, like the micro electrical signals, those little thoughts could be construed to be and this is actually like psychologically studied in like the current narrative that the the pattern of those electrical signals are thoughts, and you can couple and meta pattern those to be what's the wording here, like spirits. They're like little animating spirits, but the pattern of those animating spirits and what the way they're organized is you. I know it's weird to say, but because your body has continuity, it gives rise to meaning. It's the continuity and the physicality of your body allows for your brain, and actually like it allows for your brain to have a pattern of chemical impulses that also is within a pattern that then but also like it goes back out. Your body also receives a whole bunch of information. So your body's also it's an information receptacle. It's like an informational organ for your soul. Your body spits out a whole bunch of information and uptakes a whole bunch of information for your soul, because this is like 3 or 4 layers separated. Not separated, but like abstracted. The idea is that you are like a fire, like a little flame flickering, but I'm actually gonna say this. It's not contained within you. Just because it looks like it's emanating from your brain, it's actually the other way around. Your brain and your body. I think it's both. It's interpenetrating. When you're born, you start to have the neurological patterns, and as you develop as a human, they pattern and pattern and pattern, and the reason why certain neurological pathways die off is because your body's trying to it's trying to eliminate patterns that didn't work, that didn't lead you to progress. It's trying to eliminate the patterns that I think it's you actually choosing, like your body actually responding to your choices, to how you are patterning your thought patterns. So you are your body, but your body also like your body also generates your soul. It's interpenetration. Um, so like the way Alan Watts described it was the the flow of you have to imagine reality flowing. I know it's weird to say, but like actually the easiest way to explain this is time isn't real. I know it sounds crazy, but our brains, the vast majority of yeah, all of all how do I put this? Living creation, but like rocks don't really care for this, but all living creation has had to create a system that allows them to generate themselves in a weave, like they have to spontaneously generate themselves out of um a constantly swirling soup of material. And they what has to work is there has to be a negotiated rate of change. You can abstract out a way a how do I put this? I used to say this all the time, and I had it, and I just like you just don't remember. You don't If you don't work those muscles, you lose them. Time is an abstraction from the rates of change around you. So if you pour an acid into a base, there's actually a exothermic reaction there, and you can estimate how long it takes to get there. It's an extrapolation because a combustion reaction is extremely fast. If it's a alcohol or a liquid hydrocarbon, but a fat like a candle, it burns for a long time. That's sort of based on the state, but that's just also how chemistry works. But time is not real. So that's the first thing you're gonna have to wrap your head around. I'm not using the correct language. It's an abstracted experience of identifying where you are within a sea of chaos, a sea of potential. Um, and that's actually really important for like descriptive wise too, because that sea of potential you could actually this is the esoteric part or the religious part. You can call that like the pleroma. You could call that the unshaped potential in Genesis 1:1. The unshaped darkness potential, the unfurnished darkness. That material, that prima material, is what is around you. In fact, actually, all that you see is your brain doing an absolutely massive amount of identifying wavelengths and identifying patterns and identifying densities and functionalities, and your brain collapses like a mountain of information down to something that you can see. So you're actually like generating the reality around you. At least your brain is. You can bump into things, and like your brain can feel the resistance. It generates the resistance. You can see the three dimensionality of the candle. Obviously, if you're looking at a screen, it's two dimensional. But you can, like, if I tilt this, you can tell that there's a three dimensionality to it because there's a liquid in there that's shaping to the three dimensional. Yeah, it's shaping to the three dimensional curvature of the cylinder of the candle. Why am I doing this? Oh, I'm trying to explain what you are. Oh yeah. Anyways, so once you've abstracted off all the colors and the sounds and the patterns that you normally identify, you're actually allowed to see like the flow of reality, and then you can actually understand a lot closer to what you are. You are, like Alan Watts described it, a whirlpool in an ever-flowing stream. And what does that mean per se? Obviously, whirlpools can actually generate new whirlpools, by the way. So that would be like one way in which like your thoughts can influence, like whirlpools do not only do generate other whirlpools, but they also influence other whirlpools. So like you can actually influence those around you. But like how does that mean you have a soul, and like what happens to you after you die? That pattern exists after it leaves, by the way, because that pattern also interacts with the air above and around the liquid, the ever-flowing material. That pattern actually interacts with the air, the psychic energy, the ether outside of reality. And like even though you start in material, by the end of your life you've already generated a soul. So like you can make the claim that yes, there's a life after material death. But you also have to understand, like, consciousness is not materially, like, there's no way to come to the conclusion that someone has a consciousness through a materialistic flattening of reality. It's like a psychologist. It's literally how behavioralist psychologists function. They look at behaviors, they look at outcomes. They don't try to peer behind the scenes. Like just pure behaviorist psychologists. They're the guys that were able to train dogs. Humans are a lot more complex than that. Like I know you can say not at, like you can like you should still raise up the complexity of the dog when you say that, but humans are a lot more complex than that. Like you can do all the same things to a human, which shocker. The people who actually have resistance to that are individual thinkers, which I'm gonna get there. That's why I'm saying that. Individual thinkers are pretty resilient to training, but really receptive thinkers, like those you're gonna find in a school building, and like those you're gonna find in a Catholic church. I'm using that as the main example because there's one down the road. I could walk into a Catholic church from my house. It would not be that hard. Actually, that one would take a little bit longer because Columbus kind of like goes in like a V shape, and like I have to walk along the V and swing back around. Anyways, a true psychologist is actually going to look at if you're looking at it from a psychological avenue, if you try to break the human down to just a behavioralist, materialist worldview, you won't ever be able to generate consciousness from the evidence you'll find. You actually have to go way deeper into narratives and incentives to understand a human. And you actually have to you actually can go all the way down to their meta-narrative. And what I mean by their meta-narrative is actually their organizing narrative, and how and that also means the character they're playing within that. So for me, and also to put that into perspective, that is just a cloak. In fact, I'm almost certain that that is the cloak that God gave Adam and Eve when they were kicked out of the garden. As a consequence of eating the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. That was the cloak he gave them. And then afterwards, as a consequence of that, they had to leave the garden. So, to bring things around, the soul is actually the thing that wears the role. The thing that puts on the cape and the mask and embodies the character. So it's not actually the persona that people see that's making decisions, it's the thing behind that. So there's actually a Trinitarian view to you that you can actually draw from that. There is the id, the I am. That is something that you don't like. If you can figure out where yours is, that's great. If you can't, so be it. A lot of people place that in the heart. I don't know if that's correct. The persona is the thing that runs up here. It is actually bad to assume that you are your persona, because actually that one makes you a pretty shallow person, and two, that it ends up being pretty Luciferian. To raise the persona to the highest to the highest seat is to put your own thoughts as the organizing principle of your life. And that leads to the death of God. Because that actually leads to the death of you. Because that is your intellect trying to usurp your soul. And actually there's another entity in there that just gets completely abandoned in that, and that's your messenger, your Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the thing that that passes through you, while you have a spirit too that tells you things when you need to know them most. And it won't ever speak to you. Neither of them will. You will never hear their voice. This could be something akin to Jordan Peterson's idea of the divine spark being like a metaconsciousness. Not metaconsciousness, a metaconscious for humanity is actually a lot deeper than that. But the messenger, it's actually a neutral actor. And what I mean by that is your soul is a fire. I'm using that for a very specific reason. It is a fire that sits in the middle of a library. I'm using the library here because I like it. The library is always swirling. It's your soul is a fifth dimensional being in a fifth dimensional library. And I'm using this description because it mirrors the way God created the world. Because if you perceive God as a seventh dimensional fire sitting in in the materia, the formless materia at the beginning of creation, it starts to form into his library. And the reason why I say that is because everything has a purpose. Everything is constantly in action and telling a story. Your electrons are constantly moving, light's constantly moving in waveform, mind you. So it has a path. It has a, actually no, I wouldn't call it a path. They do have path, but they also have a pattern that they follow within their path. So they have an aim and a pattern in which they follow that aim, which actually makes them agents. This is actually the best way you can probably describe how an electron is also light, because it has to be both. It has to have a material and a informational. It has to have both material and informational components to it. And I think depending upon its necessity, it chooses which one it needs to be at the moment. How does this identify you, though? Yeah. Anyways, all of reality for God ends up growing a story around it as it starts harmonizing. That's a really important word, with God. And notice how I chose a fire, because that fire is a pattern of patterns within all of reality. And if you are able to understand that that's an organizing spirit, then that unlocks basically everything to how reality works. So God is technically within all things, but he's not. He is not all things. Like, you're not made out of God. You are. God is patterning you so that you are patterning the materiality that you are supposed to be within. And this actually gets into the Platonic forms. Biology is actually going way into Platonism. When you reproduce, you pass along your genes, but you also pass along the informational structures. Basically, like, if you treat your genome like a library, you have books that are for informational protein translation, and then you also have books that are for structure, how to read the other books, but also just God got creative and said, we will build the bookshelves out of books. I know that's really funny, but the organizational structure of your genome is also made out of you can, like, just stop thinking about coding genes and non-coding genes. They all code, but they each have different functions, and sometimes the code is literally just organize the rest of it. So there's actually a layer on top of biology that no one's actually, like, it's finally people are starting to recognize it. The evolutionary biologists are like, wait a second, we're passing this stuff on. And we actually know we're passing this stuff on because the Holocaust, I'm sorry that we have to use this, but it's whatever. This is scientific. They have done scientific studies on this. Twins who were split because of the Holocaust, those who went through it lived longer than their identical twins who didn't go through it, and that got passed down to their children's. So you ended up creating different bloodlines, even though they were identical twins, but it was epigenetic information that got passed. Different things were kept unwound and wound. So where is this going to? I think this kind of, like, identifies what sort of identifies what God is, and it sort of, because we're his children, it sort of identifies what humans are. But who does that make me? The only way I can describe myself right now is I am wearing a teacher cloak. I'm wearing a leader teacher kind of cloak. It's a meshing of two roles. Like, like sort of how Christ did it, but like I I do attend I do intend to aspire towards Christ, but I'm not going to claim to be Christ. But I do intend to pick up the archetype that he left for us. Um, so what are my intentions? Um, First of all, I love my job. I love. No, this is the thing I have to be worried about. I like the authority. But I also like the fact that I've gotten to a place where my cashiers and cart pushers respect me. Um, Now, sadly, some of them they show their face for about 5 minutes. The cart pushers, they show their face for about 5 minutes and they go and do their work. And I may see them when they come in for breaks. And at night, when I leave, I've seen they've done their job. I watch the carts; they are pretty invisible. I don't like that, but at the same time, like as a like the manager part of me is like, good shit happened. I can ignore that. The other part of me is like, oh, I don't like the fact that I didn't like even talk to you. Ugh. I have failed in some way as a teacher. Um, yeah, but inside where I do have eyes on people, I have a lot of respect. It means that I don't have to flex my muscles as much. I don't have to tell, like the dad in me tells my guys. I start by joking and saying, "Oh, come on, just go and do it. This is what I need. This is why. You guys know why too. So please." Um, but like I'm not extremely difficult when I'm doing it, but there's some days when I have to really crack down. I hate doing that, but like I'm not paging up managers, which I could do. I have the right to do, but I've managed to find a way where I make things work, and my guys all respect me. They don't. They see how everyone else runs things, and they are very happy, um, reciprocating in the hierarchy that's been formed. Um, so that's the cloak I'm wearing right now. Who am I though? I think I can identify some parts of myself that no matter which cloak I wear, I will lean into. So I do know that I have a Luciferian part of me that wants to usurp, that wants to take power for myself and use it strictly for myself. Thankfully, right now, like I've managed to balance that. Other things, I have a really strong desire for sweets. I have a really strong desire to escape the torture that I'm going through. No, not torture, the suffering that I'm going through by inducing pain relief by eating sweets. In case you don't understand, the chemicals that are used for sex are also used for, um, like the feel good chemicals are also what are used to. It's also what your body uses for pain relief. So like, um, when you take Tylenol, your body just sends out the exact same stuff. When you take oxycodone, that's a really powerful. Actually, no, not Tylenol, but when you take oxycodone, what's the word? Like, what's the chemical name? Anyways, it's the same pattern. So when doctors are giving out strong pain relievers, they're actually giving something close to just sex in a pill. The same chemical. Like, for anyone who wants to complain about porn, it it's not. The reason why it's an issue is because our pharmaceutical companies started pumping out liquid heaven, well, heaven in a pill for all the pain that was being caused by factory work and by like hard manual labor. Um, and like it in like the porn industry had just had an opening when our government started cracking down on that. Where else was this going? I think my. Oh, I'm just gonna be honest. I don't think I'm gonna start a new Christian tradition. I think I'm gonna reinvigorate the original, and not the Eastern Orthodox. I think I'm gonna reinvigorate the way. And I actually have the correct description again, the actual correct description, because I actually stepped into Neoplatonism idea there, and the biological view there. Um, Religion is um, is a living entity. God is alive, so actually you have to treat him as once he's manifested himself as Jesus Christ, which he did. Um, the In order to follow the way of Jesus, you have to wrestle with God and you have to pursue the truth. So actually, a well functioning way would be a whole bunch of free thinking, um, goodwill people who are pursuing the truth, which would be the way, would come together and have disagreements, but when they're all there in good faith, seek to learn from each other and to navigate the field. So it's actually an evolutionary. Um, it's not just an evolutionary. It's not just like the weaker ideas get defeated. All ideas get built up by in good faith discussion, and actually that is it's like the anti-evolutionary. It's like the anti-Darwinistic way. It's like Darwin says there's a whole bunch. There's a field of possible. Um, um, a field of possible projections of the genome, how it relates onto the organism, and then as resources, or as suffering and pressures come on the population, as suffering and pressures fall upon the population, and the population decreases, those who are least fit die off. This is kind of like the other way. This is a good faith, like a game. Well, this is game theory. This is ideas come together to, in good faith, compete with each other, such that the winning ones are built up better by those who they subordinate. But none of them all actually lose. They all continue to play that game over and over again. It's like an ecosystem that's constantly going through a healthy ecosystem that's constantly undergoing pressures from each organism with each of its niches. And that's actually sort of like, I know it's weird to say that and to use ecology to describe religion, but this is a living God that we're talking about. So how about this? I'm going to actually describe I Am that I Am a little bit better. He called to he called to Abraham. He never gave a name to Abraham, but the Holy Spirit, because he didn't manifest physically before. No, yeah, he did. When he eventually did manifest physically before Abraham, but when he first manifests to Abraham, he passed through him. He called him to say, "Leave the land of your father and go on an adventure, and I will make a great nation of you." So, when he did finally manifest himself, he manifested himself as a fire. Remember, there were 3 sets of animals. I think it was a dove, a sheep, and an ox. I believe something like those 3. It was 2 doves, a sheep cut in half, and an ox cut in half, I believe. He had Abraham, because it was a covenant instead of a contract, he had Abraham set those up, and then he manifested himself as a flame and walked between them. We use that imagery for marriage ceremonies, by the way, but we should also use that for, but we also use that for, because actually, in general, we use that as a religious covenant. And that's also, I think this is weird. I think this may actually represent the role of the wife to the husband, because Abraham went first, and then God, dressed as a white flame, and followed him. Like Abraham waited, and then God's white flame followed him, which may actually be why white wedding dresses have stuck around. Because it's saying, I will do these things for you if you will go out on an adventure. Huh. There's a lot there, but I think that's like one of the reasons why white wedding dresses stuck around. Anyways, God represented himself as the flame to Abraham. He represented himself as the flame to Moses when Moses went out into the wilderness. You can actually interpret that as Moses died to who he used to be by going out into the wilderness. He was forced out there, so he died. His old self was killed, and out in the wilderness he had to restart his flame, and in doing so he reconstituted himself. But then while he was out there, he had to encounter, this is interesting. I think people who reignite their flame, like a Christian is supposed to, is someone who after that they go and actually meet with God. So God first comes in the spirit to calls him to be a shepherd, and then once he's been a shepherd for a while, he sort of pulls him into the cave using the sheep, and then he as bait, and then he pulls him, then he gets his attention. I think that's how God does it usually. Like he starts as something important. He gets your attention with something important, then once he has you away from civilization, he manifests himself to you, and then he gives you a calling so compelling that you can't help yourself but not follow it. Anyways, God calls him back to Egypt to save his brothers and sisters and save his people. And that, I think, was the prototype for Jesus, because Jesus is called Emmanuel, God with us. I think a better translation, and this is the name I'm using, this is the new configuration I'm using. I am who walks among my people. That's actually, like, Emmanuel means God with us. So I think a very correct delineation, but a very important one, which I think it should be kept from now on, which I'm going to bring back, is I am who walks among his people. Because that's who Jesus is. He comes to the world as a great teacher, and he gives us a pattern to live. And he starts his ministry, he really truly starts his ministry up on the Mount. I think it's the Mount of Olives, where he first has where he first starts his sermon. It's the Sermon on the Mount. I think it's the Mount of Olives. But there's several mountains in that area. Surprise, surprise. Because, like, obviously, like, Noah landed on Mount Ararat, which is in that area. It's Middle East. There's a lot of mountains, and I don't know them all. but it was probably Mount of Olives just because of like he was in the like just the location. Um, and he goes on his it's actually a really if you're not experienced, it's actually a really cryptic message. Like if you're not like super well read or super well like if you're not really self-conscious of who you are in the world around you, you're not going to really understand. It's going to sound weird, but as you age and as you live in the world and as you grow in wisdom, you can come back and be like, oh, he's actually sort of radical. He actually calls us to it's sort of Buddhist, but it's not. He actually says something along the lines of, it has some Buddhist vibes, but it's not. He has along the lines of, firstly, um, what was it? Poor in spirit. He calls us to be poor in spirit, which means to not have on, not possess a spirit of greed, to know when enough is enough. This does not mean that you cannot make money, but it is to say that those who make money, those who start seeking money for the sake of seeking money, tend to get addicted to it and tend to not stop. And it becomes like, people who are rich aren't happy, by the way. If you can point out someone who's rich who's happy, awesome. But I don't think they're they're not happy. They're not ever going to be content. But you can meet but there are many poor people who are very happy, who have very little, who are very happy. I mean, like, how do I put this? I think poor people who are on drugs, poor people who have community around them, are very content with their lives. And why do I put it like that? Because I've met homeless people and most of them are not happy. In fact, most of the poor people who are not happy tend to have pushed people out of their lives because of their own greed. Thieves, people who steal, like not just like physical thieves like from stores, but people who manipulators, those kinds. They're not ever going to be truly happy. They're actually really like once you like you can see, like if you get used to seeing them and you get used to seeing how they behave, you can see right past their veneer of kindness. You can see that this person is not happy. They do not want you around. They want to take the stuff and leave because they do not want to work for it. They want the things and they don't have the money. Or even worse, they have the money, they do not care. They just want to get off on the high of taking it and getting out. There's a lot of those people. What's it going with that? Anyways, he has this radical claim of, I can think I can summarize his ideas. Be strong, but don't seek to use it. Be wise as a serpent, but peaceful like a dove. Be like that kind of like builds into it. Be poor in spirit, which means to know when to say I have enough, and enjoy the people around you, enjoy what you do. I need to really say the Beatitudes some more. That's like a really good start. If you like take the teachings of Christ seriously, you become completely antithetical to the current world we live in. Like, you like if how do I put this? The if the if probably if 10% of people on the planet, not on the planet, in the Western world, did not seek um, status, power, um, and wealth, signifiers of status. Um, if people knew what was enough to take care of their needs and they just stuck to that, one, the amount of extra cash they would generate would they could actually spend to help out the rest of the community. They could see the people in need and help them out. But two, there would be very little money to circulate for debt. Because the Matthew principle actually still applies. The lowest the most percentage of debt is held by 10% of the population. Which actually, surprisingly enough, it's still the most richest people. But the next 10% are going to be the poorest people who don't have impulse control, who don't have safety, who don't have stability. The rich, funnily enough, the top 10% of debt holders are rich people, which tells you exactly the kind of people they are. They're heroin addicts, by the way. Debt is basically heroin. It's economic heroin. So you can do a whole bunch with that energy, but you have to pay it back at some point, and you'll go into withdrawal when you finally stop the debt. So these people are drug addicts, and it sucks because some people just cannot make enough money to survive in our economy. And some of them are actually just so. There's actually this issue, hear me out, where there's an IQ minimum, where if you don't have it, you can't hold a job. Even then, even the jobs you could hold don't pay enough. Let that sink in. About something like 15% of the human race is unintelligent enough to maintain a job that will pay them enough to live. And actually, there's a whole lot more that just won't get paid enough to live on. But oftentimes, they could actually just cut a whole bunch of their shit. But also, we live in a society where rent-seeking behavior is admired instead of admonished. Landlords are scummy, and the reason why they're scummy is because they're not providing any actual economic value. If there is a situation where someone would rather rent than own a home, that is an upside for a landlord. That is not what most landlords are there for. They're there to rent out housing for people who cannot afford to buy a house of their own. That's the way our economy works right now. So landlords should be considered scum. If you see someone who is working for a property management agency, consider them scum. They're just as scummy as bankers. Bankers are drug dealers. These guys are rent seekers. They're just scum. They're the trolls underneath the bridge that says, if you want to cross, you're going to pay me a fee. You should kill those trolls, by the way. Not that you should kill human beings, but you should the government should disincentivize rent-seeking behavior. They should heavily tax it, because it provides no economic value. It just adds numbers to the very fake GDP of the country. Anyways, I plan to reinstitute the way. The only things the goals are literally going to be communion every Lord's Day, because that's what Christ calls his disciples to do, and we're just going to call ourselves disciples of the way. So communion is the first thing. The second thing is I will suggest we have songs Like, I'll tell people these are the songs I'd like to sing. We don't have to sing them. We could all start breaking off into groups now. If you want to have discussions with me, these are the songs we're singing to help guide us first. Also with the Lord's Supper. And thirdly, I want the way when we do our religious practices to have communal discussions. We can break off, but I'd like to swap who goes into which groups, and I'd also like to be able to have a variety of discussion templates that we can use. Plato and Aristotle had their own. Like Plato had his. There's been a plethora of discussion tactics for open group discussion tactics for a long time. And the sad thing is, like, people have tried to use them in in the last, I don't know, 150 years. When they try to use them, they ask really narrow questions. And the discussions do not end up being, they end up being astroturfed. I've been in these kinds of situations where they start with a good idea and then they try to move on to the next question when instead they should intensely focus on where the thought is going. This is what happens in Bible classes in most fundamentalist churches. This is how the Spirit gets killed in the room when they try to move on to the next question, or they try to move on past someone else's question or someone else's comment, or someone brings up a really important part where the symbolism matches. That just dies. So yeah, these are my plans for the way. Just create that's my service. I'm literally gonna bring people in, or actually we may start with songs. I know this is I'm pulling from my own original tradition of Church of Christ, but I think I'm actually making a better judgment. And the goal would be these songs. It's okay to come in during them, sit down, find a seat. If you want to jump in and start singing, you can. If you don't and you want to wait for the next song, you can. If you don't want to sing, you're lost, because the Holy Spirit is going to be there. And then we're going to take of the Lord's Supper, and then we're going to break off into discussion groups. Instead of a pastor or a preacher giving demonstrating to God's word to the people, it would be an opportunity for people to discuss. And then I think after the fact you can make some announcements. These are some things our church is concerned about. These are what our elders are concerned about. And I think the eldership should not have any authority over the congregation except handling funds, or if there's a serious rift and they need to ask people to leave. That may be it. If there's a major uproar. If someone's coming in to intentionally and dishonestly coming in to disrupt the church, that's something else. And that is really hard to distinguish. But that's why you have elders, people who are very experienced in discerning the intentions of others. That is a very good reason to have elders, someone who's experienced in literally just discerning the intentions of others. But also, elders should be there to have, you can ask elders stuff about your personal life, that's fine. They would have experience in marriage, that's some of the reason why you'd have elders. They would have reason, they'd have understanding in their own career field, they'd have reason and understanding in some of politics. You don't really want them to be political actors, though. But the issue is nowadays politics has spilled even into the church, which is a shame. Yeah, that's my goal. Literally just songs. Actually, songs, prayer, communion, then split off. And then like I'm cool with that taking like an hour or two. And then like people should use this and go to their employers and be like, I'm not working Sundays. If you try to discriminate against me, I have the government to back me up. That's what needs to happen. Anyways, that's it. That's exploring some of my ideas. Am I my ideas? Probably not. Actually, my ideas do come from me. But who am I? By the way, my name is actually Aaron Klein.